Good morning. Yesterday, after taking a hiatus of, 18 days, closer to 3 weeks than the 2 weeks that I previously mentioned, I'm back again the day after yesterday's sharing. I called it a teaching, but that's really not my intent. I prefer to share. A part of that is because having been a professor, being a retired professor in Taiwan, my experience of teaching here, where I came from Hawaii, where I had an opportunity to teach university level as a lecturer, I naturally tended to have a class of equals. Teacher being in the hierarchy of things, being not much higher than relegated to a director to kind of guide and lead his students. And this is essentially what a graduate seminar is. The teacher's there, but not in a position of superior knowledge. Of course, superior accomplishment. He has the letters behind his name or her name, after all, and we would be derelict to not recognize their efforts to obtain these initials. And my favorite professors never referred to themselves as Dr. da da da. I always thought that somehow it just didn't sit right, a little pretentious it seemed. I think, what's wrong with professor? I think professor is a legitimate recognition of their academic accomplishments. Leave the title of doctor, I always thought, to the white coats. But that probably is just me. But I hesitate to say that I'm teaching in this context that I'm sharing with you now, because of my introduction here to the hierarchical relationship. Teacher is definitely on a pedestal, talking down to the students. And unfortunately, their whole educational system is posited on this, the dynamics of this teaching from on high, where the students would learn by rote memory to simply listen and repeat. Regurgitate, I always thought, get it out on the paper. Keep it in there long enough to get it on the paper, because the whole system is driven by grades. Unfortunately, it's not driven by attainment of knowledge, achieving some kind of expertise in your discipline. It's all aimed towards the economics, getting the degree, getting out there, getting a job. And I think most times, the majority of the students would be better served to come out of high school with as much of an education as possible in the system that they find themselves, and get a job, start working, accumulate some money, some experience, mature, find out where their interests really lie. Because essentially here, that's postponed as you go to four or beyond years of your higher education. And only then do you go to work, and only then do you have time to start the discovery of who you are and what you want to do. So that's why I'm reticent to be as presumptuous that I'm teaching anything. Essentially what I'm doing is sharing my experiences. And recently I've been doing a lot of introspection. I think the 18-day hiatus from sharing taking a respite was necessary to do some reflection. And I really came up with something that probably for most of you is so simple, but it was so profound for me to understand finally after all these years of an elusive struggle to gain clarity that indeed I'd failed to separate the clarity that I was seeking was primarily mental clarity, to be a clear thinker. Something that was not my natural condition, and something that I struggled through my academic career. I needed, as you progress, so-called progress, in your graduate studies, you're forced, you're pigeonholed to narrow and narrow and narrow some more your field of inquiry, your field of study, and to the point where the definition of a PhD is essentially that you offered something new to your discipline, a new argument, a new position, a new take, and you needed to systematically support your unique contribution. And the whole thing seemed ludicrous and a giant waste of time. It's only by focusing on the end goal, which is really a shame because it's the process that I've learned to appreciate so much. But without focusing on the end game, it's really easy to get lost, especially for me because I love tangents. I love to go off on a tangent. I just live for tangents, more or less, just to see, just to entertain. I always had an intellectual curiosity as well as a finely developed spiritual curiosity. And I remember the old adage that I really grew up with: question authority. And only recently I was able to turn this on its ear. Authority was not the perception of outside sources that had somehow had some power over me. This was not what questioning authority eventually meant to me. And as many things, I spent a lot of time questioning the powers that be until it all became an inward directed focus. And last sharing, I touched on the heart of the matter when you stop questioning anything on the outside. You stop verbalizing your question, because inherent in the process of verbalization is that your intent is to direct it to somewhere or someone. Occasionally, you would shrug your shoulders and look up and ask, who am I? What am I? Why am I? As if there was some source out there of information. And that's why such questions are little more than empty rhetoric or adventure in an adventure in futility. This is really no source, no outside source to look to. So these I've shared that the questions disappear, only to replace a more subtle activity that again was taking place. I hate to say unconscious, maybe on a subconscious, because I'm certainly aware at some level that this process was taking place. But to start questioning your answers, and by answers I expand them to mean belief systems. The more profoundly entrenched, the more deeply that you're committed to any belief or structure of beliefs, the more questioning is warranted. And I've been fortunate, I think, to never really hold on to any cardinal laws, much less cardinal rules. Culturally acceptable belief systems and concepts just never were for me. It was the questioning. And so I salute this role of questioning. It did have its time and place, as does everything. But the time when I found myself without questions, my questions had somehow magically evaporated into the thin air, or so it seemed, only replaced by more subtle, and subtle in the sense that it was occurring in the inner realms. Question answers, question beliefs, question surety. Accepting that it's a world full of unsureties. Even the two unavoidable ones, they talk about death and taxes. Perhaps both of those are negotiable. Taxes by elusive reporting, hiding of assets, and all the other tricks of the trade. So maybe there is some tax, but minimizing the tax. And the other, they say, is inescapable, is death. But the only thing, as far as I can see, that dies is the necessity to stay on the wheel, apparently never-ending wheel of reincarnation to the level that we find ourselves as I speak, as I share, reincarnated in the physical body, escaping this, and at the same time recognizing that there's a wheel, that there's a pattern, that only you die as you've come to accept yourself, your ego, only to be reborn and replaced with a new ego. But interestingly enough, it seems to me that personality somehow sticks around. Somehow the personality, and by personality I don't mean the ego, I mean the likes, the dislikes, the propensities, the body of experience, accumulated experience, seems to, at least at this stage of my development, this stage of my pondering, it seems that the personality continues, and it just adapts itself to a new ego, somehow, probably influencing it to help create the conditions that are necessary to deal with the karma, release the karma, and eventually escape the wheel. That there comes a point in all of our journeys where we have the option of not reincarnating. We've earned, for lack of a better word, we've earned this choice. And of course, one of the points of searching for awakening or enlightenment is to serve all sentient beings, to help them in their process of awakening. So in that time, a choice is made. There's many, many great Buddhas that have made this choice. Milafo, the laughing Buddha, has a smile and a laughter and a love that's individuated. It's unique for each one of us. And Dhammo, Bodhidharma, is another. And he has a special place in my life and in my heart. But there's a myriad of Buddhas who have chosen, and there's also a myriad of Buddhas that continue the work, the forward work, laying the seeds, trailblazing for those of us who follow. And coming back to where I'm headed in this sharing is, I'd be remiss to address something. I always review, I want to listen to my previous lessons, and about 17 minutes into my 33 minute plus sharing, about 17 minutes, I misspoke. I was trying to share how jhana yoga had failed to be the appropriate tool for me. It was the one that most Westerners are most familiar with. Still, quiet, still silence, the mind in hopes or in the promise of attaining clarity. Perpetual clarity, one would assume. So this is Raja Yoga. And I had a natural tendency to Jnana Yoga, the evolution of ideas to knowledge, to wisdom. If you want, the path of the thinker. And for many years, until I widened my study, I wasn't really aware that there was an alternative that suited me better, as I was a dismal failure in quieting the greater mind, the thinking mind, much less the bothersome, lower level, incessantly questioning tool of the ego, the monkey mind. So, having addressed that, I meant Raja Yoga didn't work for me, and I went to Jnana Yoga. And probably no one will pick that out pick out when I misspoke. But I'm sharing it to the one person that might be wondering if such an elusive soul exists. Nevertheless. So, I've always loved language. And I know the inherent shortcoming of words can only envelop, can only form around ideas and concepts that we're trying to share, doing our best to express. And it's really interesting that in the world of spirituality, in the spiritual world, overuse. Once a word becomes part of the popular culture, and I'll use it karma for example, because they talk about good karma and bad karma, and essentially karma is karma. We're in no position to judge what is good karma and what is bad karma. Both of them need to be shed, to be understood, and ultimately discarded. So karma is an example of a word that it's part of the English lexicon now. But unfortunately, overuse of anything lessens its importance, lessens its impact. And another one is enlightened. Enlightened became so abused. Instead of just accepting it in the light, it started to carry baggage. And most people, most spiritual pundits will seldom use this word because it's been overused to the point of meaningless. But remember the basics, that in the light, enlightenment. And awareness is a much more widely used. But unfortunately, that's becoming almost equally meaningless, equally as ineffective as its big brother, enlightenment. Just something that... So maybe someone will come up with a new term that we'd be destined to be overused to the point of meaninglessness. because it's really not open to interpretation. It's the only reality. And in my journey, I don't know about yours, but awaken, even that term awaken, meant to me to awaken into a new condition. Just as you awaken from a dream. It's from one place to another place. It's a transition. It's a journey. It's a path. And all of these are equally not so. The idea that the one, moi, wakes into the wholeness is again just as topsy-turvy, just as upside down as questioning in the hopes of getting answers is turned on its head to be questioning any answer from any source, be it self or other. So too, as it turns out, the one does not awaken to the whole. So already you can see that this is not the process, and I'll elaborate further. It's not the process. So already the failure of the terminology awakening, to be awake, as if you're in some other state. And this is what the Buddha talked about when, right after he woke up, he said, we woke up. Everyone, as he had his experience, he said, we're all Buddhas. We're all in a continual, constant state of awareness. And a lot of scholars, and this has been the source of, well, probably schisms within Buddhism itself. One group, one teacher took it another way and he went this way, and these schisms, these inevitable failures of human constructs, human attempts to organize hierarchies, are all sooner or later bound to fail. Someone new, someone different, the power struggles, all these things that are readily inherent in the political system are equally as part of the social system, the spiritual system. Just look around. Robes, some way significant. It's a uniform. And you can see my rank in the so-called rankless world. So Buddha, all these people, just the schism, and as time goes by, the schism gets greater, and so that when you get out to the periphery, it's hard to even see the commonality of the origin. But with this experience, through non-abiding non-permanent awakening to abiding or permanent awakening, from which there permanent awakening from which there is no return. Inherent, temporary, non-permanent, non-abiding. You can, and probably will, relapse more than once. But what became clear is that the whole becomes the one. So one becoming whole, it's the other way. The whole becomes one. And this is what Buddha talked about. When one of us wakes up, the whole of us wakes up, because something comes into you, not you going into something else. So that's a lot to think about. And when you experience this, and you will, when you begin remembering what you learned and were taught and nurtured even to forget, when this time comes, you'll see the whole within. You didn't go anywhere. There's no journey. It starts and stops, if it can be seen to start or stop. It continues as it is, was, and always will be. The whole is within the one. That's why people are really confused when you tell them that we're all Buddhas. But it could be no other way. In each time, one of us lets the whole enter and become part of their one. The whole world, each and every one of us, is awakened yet again, is aware of our constant, continual state.